I went to bombing school in Midland, Texas, in March, I guess, of 1942. And I graduated there as a bombardier and a second lieutenant on the 2nd of July, 1942. And the training consisted of dropping bombs on targets out in the West Texas wasteland. And I don't remember now how many bombs every student had to drop in the course of the 3 months training. But the bombs were practice bombs, like the one you see by the head of my bed now. It's painted blue. As you see it, it's hollow, like a piece of stovepipe. And they put sand in it till it weighed 97 pounds. Then they put a 3-pound metal canister in the tail end, which contained a spring-loaded triggering device and a little bit of black powder to make a puff of smoke when it hit the ground, so that we could see, even if we were at 20,000 feet, we could see that puff of smoke and see how close it was to the center of the target, which is our way of judging the students' accuracy. When I graduated there, I went to Sebring, Florida for, I don't know, a month or more, for a combat crew training period. Then we went, I guess, Salt Lake City, and then to Walla Walla, Washington, where we organized a bomb group, 4 squadrons of B-17s. And we moved from one base to another. We opened a new base at Rapid City, South Dakota. From there, 6 of our planes, mine included, flew to Albuquerque, New Mexico, because one of the Hollywood companies was making a movie called Bombardier. And once their heroes all graduated from bombing school and were commissioned officers, they had to get ready to go to war. And the movie company wanted 6 B-17s. And the government was always glad to do anything that would help promote our activities. And Washington got in touch with the commanding general of the 2nd Air Force, who sent an order to my base commander, who told my group commander to send 6 planes, 3 from my squadron, 3 from another. And they picked 3 in each case that always flew together, because they're going to do a lot of flying formation in this picture, and they wanted pilots that were accustomed to flying with each other. We were there only 12 days, but our group was moving to a new air base. We opened again a new field in Pocatello, Idaho, and we got orders to fly from New Mexico to Pocatello, and we got there before the rest of our group. So our 6 planes were the first to land at Pocatello, and they were still working on the base. And there was a guy on a piece of equipment, I don't know, a truck or a grader or what, sitting on the runway. He just stopped his machine and looked up as these 6 B-17s came down and flew only 100 feet over his head and pulled up. We couldn't land. And he just sat there watching us till somebody sent a jeep out to chase him off the runway. And so we spent, I don't know, a month or so there. A similar experience of somebody watching us happened at Albuquerque. They rarely saw anything like a B-17. It was a bombing school with nothing but AT-11s. And one day when we finished shooting, Captain McClatchy from Delaware County, Pennsylvania, was the leader of my 3 planes, and he asked the tower for permission to drag the runway. So, of course, the pilot in the tower told the flight control sergeant to, tell him yes, he can drag the runway. And where is he now? All right, warn all planes to stay away from the base till further notice, and to look out for 3 B-17s coming in from the south. So we flew the length of the runway, only maybe 50 feet off the ground, or less. And one man was out there working on a runway light, and he didn't know this was going to happen. And when he heard the roar behind him, he turned and looked over his shoulder. He jumped up, started to run. He only went about 10 steps, and he came back and just scooped up what tools he could and took off again. And I was sitting in the glass nose of the plane on the left, and I went right over him, and I could see his face and the terror.
Lack of communication.
Yes. They didn't.
Still going on.
Nobody got word to this man. Traffic on the base heard it because every Jeep had a radio. So then, as I say, we went to Pocatello and opened a new base. And eventually from there we went to Pyote, Texas. Then I came home on leave. We were ready to go overseas. And for some reason, they decided to take me out of that squadron and put me in B-24s. And one base and another, I eventually, we formed a group consisting of 4 squadrons. And we went to Langley Field, Virginia, where we were only a cadre then. And at Langley Field, we picked up enough airplanes and crews and mechanics and whatnot to form a full squadron, a full group. And that was our staging. We finished there, we were ready to go overseas. And we went to Mitchell Field on Long Island, which was where all the last-minute decisions were made, and my navigator got sick. So we were a couple of weeks there. Other planes in our outfit had already left. When our navigator came out of the hospital, we flew to Morrison Field in Florida. And there we were there only a few days till we got orders to fly across the sea. Now in those days, a plane couldn't fly all the way across the ocean. And we had to go to Trinidad. Before we left around 10 o'clock at night on Christmas Eve. Before we got to Trinidad, the navigator got sick. This time it was food poisoning. They gave us some bad lunch meat when they packed a kit for us at Morrison Field. And he was always hungry. He was the first to dive into it. And when he ate a sandwich, it didn't take him long to start throwing up. You were supposed to fly a certain pattern over the ocean 20 or 30 miles from the north coast of Trinidad as a recognition thing. a safety measure. If you didn't fly that pattern over the ocean, fighters would come up to check you out. Well, we had a sick man on board, and our pilot called the tower, and he said, "Rules or not, I'm coming straight over your north coast, and I want an ambulance." And they gave him instructions for the runway and so forth. There was an ambulance waiting at the end of the runway before we got there, and it followed us until we stopped. So they took Franz out of the plane and put him in the hospital. So we stayed there 3 or 4 days. And finally flew to Belém in Brazil. Stayed there overnight and flew to Fortaleza in Brazil, which was on the easternmost bulge of South America. And we had to wait there till weather cleared up in the middle of Africa, because the planes that were going across ahead of us were all waiting at Dakar till they were able to fly farther east. So Dakar was so well loaded with airplanes they couldn't take any more. When we finally flew to Dakar, we stayed there only a day or two, and then went to Marrakesh. And there we had, it's on the desert really, Sahara Desert. And when we landed in the middle of the afternoon, the temperature was about 130 or 40 degrees. And trucks picked us up at the plains and took us into a little oasis where they had a few buildings. And we lined up and went to the supply office, and they handed each man 4 blankets. And the front man in the line started to complain, and the supply sergeant said, "Soldier, just shut up and take them. 8 o'clock tonight, you wish you had 4 more." He was right.
Wow.
It was so damn cold, nobody slept. I put on cotton socks and covered them with wool socks, or the other way around, doesn't matter. I put on long john underwear and a woolen uniform, wool gabardine coveralls, and then a fur-lined flying suit. And I laid there and shook all night.
On the edge of the Sahara.
Yes. Eventually we arrived in Tunisia. We were just outside of the city of Tunis, which is the capital. And we stayed there for at least a month while our ground people came over on ships. There were 4 ships, 1 for each squadron. And once they arrived, clerks, cooks, mechanics, and so forth, and got established on an air base in Italy, we flew up there. And after a couple of days of practice, we were ready to start flying war missions.